Hello, media of communication. We know there are various medias and various channels of communication. When you're working in an organization, you need to follow or choose the appropriate media and the appropriate channel for your communication process. The choice will depend upon the situation, the circumstances, and also the protocol. Before you actually start making decisions on the choice of the media and the choice of the channels, it is better to understand the various channels and the media used in each channel. Now, as we see that in an organization, there is external communication as well as internal communication. External communication is the communication with the outside, the people outside the organization. That could be the government bodies, the suppliers, the consumers, the vendors. Internal communication is the communication which occurs within the organization. All the communication process that occur between the employees of the organization is called as the internal communication. Now, for all this communication, you have to choose various channels and various media of communication. And before we go any further, let us revise that communication is a dynamic and transactional process. Transactional, that is a two-way process. By your just speaking and saying, a communication process is not complete till the other person, the receiver, has understood what you are trying to communicate. You cannot say that your communication process is complete. That is why it is known as the two-way or a transactional process. Transactional is the sender sends a message, the receiver receives it, and he gives a feedback. The sender receives the B feedback and becomes the receiver at that particular point of time, and at times that is one single transaction. And in a communication process, these kind of transactions keep going on. It is not just one single communication is not complete in just one transactional process. It keeps going on. It's a continuous and dynamic process. Now, communication is physically transmitted through an appropriate channel and media that we all know as a physical transmission. Currently, what you are seeing is an oral transmission, a combination of the oral channel, the written channel, and the visual channel, and the electronic channel. This whole presentation is is a mixture of all the channels of communication, that is written, oral, electronic, as well as visual. So these are the various channels and media which you can use. Now it is depends upon you, the manager. As a manager, you will have to decide on what media you have to choose, whether you have to talk to the person by face-to-face conversation, or whether you have to write a letter, or even in a written communication, you will have to decide whether it has to be a letter, a memo, an order, a circular, or the various other forms of communication, the written communication that are there in the organization. Now, channels and media, as we have just said, are interchangeable depending upon the situation, depending upon the circumstances, depending upon the number of people you have to address. Sometimes you use a memo or you put a memo on the notice board, and the notice board becomes the media. And the written communication, that is the memo, is the written communication and the channel that you are using. So you put a memorandum or a memo on the notice board so that a lot of people can see, your reach becomes much wider. And then again, the situation could be that you want only a limited number of people to read or know about the communication process. In that case, circumstances, you use either a email or a letter to the limited number of people, or it could be a telephone call. So the choice and media are interchanged, and it depends upon the situation as well as the protocol of the organization, that are what are the set rules and regulations of the organization to use those media. Now first, let us take up channels. The channel can be verbal or non-verbal. Verbal is putting it into words, and non-verbal is your expressions, nonverbal communication is your posture, your eye contact, your hand gestures, your the way you, the tone, the pitch of your speech, and uh, there are various forms of nonverbal communication which we will be discussing later. There are times that the nonverbal communication expresses or says more than the actual verbal communication. Verbal communication is the communication which is with words, words that is written or oral, but when you put the idea or thought that you have in your mind into symbols, then it becomes the verbal communication. And non-verbal communication is communicated through your expressions, your tone, your posture, your head movement, your hand gestures. All these are the non-verbal communication cues, and these cues, these signs give away much more than the verbal communication. Now, verbal communication, as I have just said, can be either written or oral. This is how you put it into words. Words, that is the symbols that you use to express your thought or idea that has come into your mind. Now, written and oral, these are the verbal communications. First, let us discuss the written communication. We all know what is written communication. When you write down the words and the symbols, when on paper or electronic media, you put into what is there in your mind, the thought, the communication that has to be communicated. The communication could be anything. It could be a directive, it could objective, could be any. It could be to inform the people, it could be to direct and instruct the people, to educate the people, to train the people. The various objectives of communication, it could be any. Now, it is the job of the manager to decide whether to choose a written form of communication or an oral communication. So to help you decide which form of communication you will be choosing, it's best to understand the various advantages as well as the disadvantages of written communication. Written communication requires a lot of imagination, time, and effort. It is a very time consuming job. You have to think, plan, analyze the communication, that the fact or the idea that you has to be communicated, the message that has to be communicated. It requires a lot of planning. If you try, you will realize it takes you time to write an essay, to write a letter. And now these are the practical implications of what all you have been learning in your schools or colleges about the language part. In business communication, the language which is to be used does not have to be a very high flying or a very difficult language. It is because it is not necessary that other people would understand difficult words, difficult language. Your prose skills, your writing skills are not to be tested in the form of your prose, as it how difficult or how fancy you are writing. The writing should be simple, basic, such that everybody can understand the language. Then again, planning is important. The written communication has to be planned. It has to be planned according to be, maybe there are certain set rules and regulations of the organization in which need to be followed for the written communication, and or you have to plan it according to the sequence of importance, the logical sequence, that is, which is important will be written first, which is not, less important would be written next, and sometimes what is most important and what might as well be repeated and again in the communication. So it needs time to do it. If you want quick results, it's best to just make a telephone call. That's the fastest way of communicating with a person. Now, advantages of written communication are: it leaves a permanent record. It does not allow the space for the other person, the receiver, to go back. That okay, I did not get informed. If supposing you're asking them to do some work, this is an example, and they do not perform it, and say ki, oh, you did not tell me on time. By the time you told me, it was too late, or etc. 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 The excuses can be a number. So it leaves a permanent record that yes, this was informed at so and so time, at so and so date, and if the work was not done, then it is the person's fault, or action can be taken. Besides that, it also leaves a permanent written communication, leaves a permanent record for various things. That is, the sales, how much sales was done, you need a permanent record to calculate the averages at the end of the year or the end of the month or end of the week to keep your maintain your records. So for the purpose of records also, written communication is mandatory than just the oral communication. Okay, so the sale was this just this much. Nobody will remember like that. So written communication is important whenever you want a record. Even if you want a record of the say, even for sake of disciplining, if you send a letter to a person as to a show cause notice or anything that the work was not done on time. So you want, whenever you want a permanent record, it's advisable to use written communication. Then in the case of legal evidence, it's a legal evidence. If you get a letter or you send a letter, it's legal evidence that yes, this communication was done, and if the thing was not followed up, if the work was not done accordingly or appropriately, or you do not get any payment, the payment is delayed. So for various things in an organization, you need legal evidence. So again, written communication is a form of legal evidence. Then precision and accuracy. When you are writing, you can write with more precision and accuracy. You can check, recheck, correct, and if there is any mistake in your writing, you can improve it, correct it. But while you're giving of oral communication, what you say at times depends a lot upon the other person's reaction. You might lose your temper, anger could be one of them, or you might forget what you had to say, a certain point that was necessary to be said. So precision and accuracy is again another factor which is important. If you need to be accurate, it's better to go for written communication. Then repetition, it can be repeated, it has a wide access. The you can send one circular, one notice, one order to a number of people. If you just put it on the notice board, then written communication in the newspapers, magazines, journals, again, we know it has a very wide access. Facilitates delegation of power. If you have to delegate power to people, then if you, and it's a written communication helps you in the delegation of power. In the cheapest form of educating employees. If you need to educate employees or train them for a certain thing, you have to give instruction to them. Then writing on a paper or sending a written email is the cheapest form, rather than you actually arranging for training programs, because then it's going to cost you more, the space, the trainers, and the time which the employees are going to spend on that much for that particular training program. All this is going to cost. So it's the cheapest form of educating employees. Then it conforms to the rules and regulations of the organization. Again, like that's the most important thing. When you're working in an organization, you have to see what is the protocol. So the protocol is what are the rules and regulations of the communication process, how it has to be done, how it needs to be followed. So keeping all that in mind, you have to decide upon the communication. The disadvantages. The disadvantages of written communication are, like we discussed, it's time consuming. It takes time for you to put it down on paper, to write, and to analyze, to plan everything. It takes time. And it's in case of a letter, it will take time to, in case of an official letter, it takes time to for the person to receive the letter and for you to send. Costly. It can be destroyed if suppose the people can just destroy it and say that they did not receive the written communication, and it delays decisions. If supposing the managers have to decide upon something, and if the various managers at the manager head at the various departments have to come up with a common decision, then it will take time. If they keep sending letters to each other or written communication to each other for them to read and then decide. But instead, if they get together in a group and have a meeting and jointly, the decision can be taken much faster than if they go follow a written communication process. Then it is difficult to get quick clarifications. A written communication, if a person receives, then if you want clarification, then you send again a written communication to the other person. Okay, please explain this to me, I have not understood this, what exactly do you want? So it takes time. So clarification can take time in case, but if it is an oral communication, the clarification can be done immediately. Once you are giving instructions to the person and he is not understanding, he can immediately ask you as to what you are trying to say. Then lack of secrecy, because written communication can be read by other people. The proof is there. Since it is a documented proof, it can be read by other people also. Therefore, that it can create a lack of secrecy. Now, moving on to oral communication. The oral communication, the advantages of also has various advantages and disadvantages. Oral communication is when you speak to the other person directly. It could be via a telephone call or a meeting or a face-to-face conversation. Now, the advantages, the biggest advantage of oral communication is the immediate feedback. When you're talking to the person, you can get an immediate feedback from the person by his whatever he says, but the feedback could also be by the his expressions, by the nod of his head. Yes, you understand that, okay, fine, this person has understood what we are trying to say. By his expressions, the gesture, the posture, you can make out that the person is agreeing to what you're saying, or whether he's not agreeing, or whether he is uh, uh, has understood or not. Again, it is more economical than the written communication. In some certain situations, meetings and all can take time and to space. When you have to organize, it can be time consuming also. But by and large, making a telephone call is much more or economical or than the letter and sending the letter. It has a personal touch. You can, when during oral communication, you can your personal touch, you can motivate people by your feelings, your expressions. The motivation will be there for the people to do the work, the employees to actually try and follow the targets that have been set by the organization. Moving on to the disadvantages, oral communication also has its disadvantages. One of them is poor retention. Written communication, as we know, has documented proof, and it, yes, and it can be a reminder. The documented proof can be a reminder as to what is supposed to be done, or what needs to be done, or what is the message of the communication. But oral communication, once somebody tells you something, then you move on, and somebody else tells you something, you have a tendency to forget what was told earlier. So it can be you can forget what was told to you, and again, it has no record, there is no proof of what was communicated. Oral communication can also create a lot of misunderstandings in the form of that the expression and the non-verbal communication at times can give a different meaning to what was said. So because of that, there can be a misunderstanding, and sometimes you what was said can be taken as a different with different meaning. You are trying, words have different meaning, and if a person is saying it and the person takes it differently, like for example, just a simple word like get out, these two words depends upon the non-verbal cues as to what is the meaning of the words. If you are saying it playfully, oh, just get out, it means nothing. If you say it angrily, that get out, it's the expression that you put into the words which give a meaning to your communication. So if supposing by for whatever reason the expression was not appropriate, the tone, the pitch, the was not appropriate, it can give a different meaning and create misunderstanding. Now, media of communication. We've discussed the channels of communication. Now, coming to the media of communication. The media of communication in an organization can be various. Oral communication, for example, has face-to-face communication. Then there are the speeches which people give. Presentation. Now, presentations are a mixture of the various channels of communication or the media of communication. It has a electronic channel media. It has a visual media, and it has written as well as an oral media of communication. So presentation also has oral communication. Discussions, it could be a group discussion, it could be a discussion in a conference or a meeting. Public speeches, conferences, video conferencing. Video conferencing is very popular these days. The people who do not have the time to actually go and meet, and it is much more time saving when when various people just talk on the video and try and arrive to some decisions. Telephone, meetings, public address systems. So these are the various media which can be used in a organization for oral communication. The decision to choose the appropriate media depend upon the situation, the circumstances, remember, and also the rules and regulations of the organization. Now the written communication, as you all know, is also letters, memos, reports, emails, faxes, circulars, orders, minutes, reports, manuals, handbooks, and journals. Now, handbooks and manuals are there usually in organizations. They have the written, they have the specific rules and regulations of the organizations, their policies and procedures written in these manuals or these handbooks, and they are available in the organization. If you want to check upon what is the protocol of a certain communication process, or what are the processes in which the work needs to be done, so all this is specifically written in these manuals and handbooks. Also, what are the level of hierarchy, what are the what is the scalar chain of command which you have to follow for your communication process, what are the various networks of communication in the organization. So all this information can be attained from the manuals and the handbooks. Now moving on to, there is something which is known as media richness. When you're choosing the media, the maximum any communication process which has a maximum number of media, a variety of media used in that particular communication process, that is the media richness. So a communication process can be most effective if it is high on media richness. That is, it's very rich, it has used the various media of communication. So media that uses a variety of channels to carry information is called rich media. And the criteria are, how can you call it a rich media? The criteria for it being called rich media are the availability of instant feedback. When you can get immediate feedback in a communication process, then that is you can say is the rich in media. The capacity of the medium to transmit multiple cues such as body language, voice tone, and inflections. So if all this can be combined in the communication process, then again it is known as rich media. The use of natural language and not the formal language. Again, when during oral communication, it is good if you use a conversational language. In a written form of communication, again you have to follow the protocol, and conversational language is not cannot be used. But in oral communication, if you can use conversational language, it's like you're talking to the people rather than giving them orders, and that directing them in a as like you're talking to them. It can be much more effective than the authoritative way of communicating, oral communication, as orders. Then the personal focus of the medium. Face-to-face communication is supposed to be the richest media, and email is supposed to be the leanest, that is the thinnest. The email has the least possible richness of communication. In a face-to-face communication, you can talk to the person, you can motivate a person, your expressions are there with which you can tell them how important the thing is and what is the necessity of the thing. Your expressions and your non-verbal cues can give lot of meaning and richness to the communication process. And in case, and again, you can get an immediate feedback from the person, whether by his facial expressions and by his posture, by his shaking of the head and his hand movement, his eye movement. You'll be able to know that yes, whether he has agreed with it or not, whether he has understood or not, understood or not. And in email, it is just sending a basic information on an electronic media with a written communication, in which that is the thinnest form of media, whereas its richness is concerned. But again, it is important that what is important, you have to decide on what media you have to choose. There are most of the time these days, the communication process in an organization is through the mails only. You just inform. That is when you have to just inform the person. Then I think email is the ideal way of communicating. Now, the media choice in communication. How do you choose the media? Which media needs to be is more appropriate, and which channel is more appropriate? These decisions will be upon you once you start working in an organization. The choosing the appropriate media can depend upon the protocol. The protocol of the organization is, that is the rules and the regulations. What are the rules and regulations of the organization? How it needs to be sent, how the previous people, or how what is the regular procedures of these information to be sent, whether it has to be sent by written, whether it needs to be people need to be informed orally, and then again whether it has to be informed by face to face conversation or by a telephone call, and in case of written, whether it has to be a notice or a circular or an order. All this depends upon the existing rules and regulations or the protocol of the organization. Situation, like I said, circumstances. So certain times the situation, it becomes such that you will have to skip the protocol. If you some information needs to be done, then the circumstances are such you will have to make a telephone call or go immediately and have a face-to-face conversation. If there is some clarity which you need to have some clarity on certain things. Just an example. And if you wait for a written communication, it will take time and the work needs to be done immediately. So then it is best to immediately either call, or if the person is there, go and talk to the person, have a face-to-face conversation. It depends upon the protocol, the situation, and the time frame that you have. How much time frame you have in your hand. The work needs to be done at what speed and how much, at what time. The cost, again, when you're working in an organization, you need to keep a check on the cost of everything, because cost efficiency is one of the prime factors on which the organizations keep an eye on. So how much it's going to cost if you have to inform a lot of people, and if whether it has to be sent by a written media or by electronic media, the cost of the communication process also has to be kept in mind. Objective of the communication. The objective of the communication, if you go back, if you recall, are to inform, to train, to educate, to direct, to instruct. So keeping the objective of the communication in mind, you will have to decide upon that. What is the objective? What is the cost? How much time do you have in your hand? Then what are the rules and regulations for the communication process and the communication network also. And then one, keeping all these things in mind, it depends upon the situation, the circumstances. If it has to be done fast, then it has to be done fast, and the change, the choice of the media and the channel will change. So depends upon the protocol, situation, time frame, cost, and the objective of the communication as to what media you use and what channel you use. Now, to summarize the media of communication, we can say that we all know communication is a dynamic and a two-way process. Information is transmitted physically through various media and various channels. There are various media and channels existing in the organization. Choosing the appropriate media and channel can depend upon the situation, the protocol, the time frame, cost, and objectives of the communication process. Communication can be both verbal and non-verbal. Verbal communication can be again written and or oral. A media is considered to be rich if it uses a variety of channels, that is and then again we had discussed that email is the least rich media, and face-to-face conversation is the most rich, has the highest richness, because in that you get a feedback from the person, and then you are able to give your, through your non-verbal communication, you're able to express your feelings or emotions come on the face, and how important it is, how important that communication is, also comes on your face, and it shows in the communication process. So deciding upon the communication media and the channel depends upon the person, the individual, the need of the organization. That will be all. Thank you.